We're going back to space, where I'm going to tell you about what happened when I played Distant Worlds 2, and talk about various aspects of the game along the way. Should be a comfy time, let's get started. I'm setting up our new galaxy here first, and immediately the game was dumping on my PC for not being able to run the largest galaxies on the higher settings. I should mention that I did play this game before, basically when it came out, and I ended up abandoning my campaign because the performance issues were so bad I just had to stop. And right at the end of this commentary, I'll be going back to look at my old save and make a direct comparison. But yes, I heard the game's performance had improved, so I'm here to try again, and I'll tell you now that I think the game has indeed been seriously improved performance-wise, and will be fine. I was running this thing on max speed in the endgame, and hardware usage barely even increased, like some kind of miracle behind the scenes has brought Distant Worlds 2 back to Offie game grounds. But yes, if you have a better PC than me, you can pick more stuff in the beginning. I'm going to be playing as this kind of deep sea squid faction, mainly because I actually got the DLC that contains this faction, so I figured I better use it. There are loads of buffs for each faction and their government type you choose, which I didn't really think about here. The only special thing I'll be keeping in mind for my faction is that they not only prefer deep ocean planets, but they continuously get free resources on deep ocean planets. What that means in practice is incredibly hard to say, and we'll be getting to that later. Now, I made the mistake of choosing this ring type of galaxy, where the stars are either concentrated in the middle or they're on the edge. I probably thought that was a cool idea, but it wasn't. I ended up picking the ring, like a loser. I was probably thinking like, yeah, we'll settle in the outer ring and then do this big like invasion of the middle thing where the forgotten guys on the edge come in for some dramatic move. But really, grabbing a place on the edge of the map isn't some like safe perch where you can secretly build up for your grand scheme like I might have been thinking, and like my younger self certainly would have thought. This is the wrong way of thinking about it, because if you're hiding on the edge of the map, like what are you hiding from? You're trying to stay safe. You don't want to fall prey to the other factions, and prey is the word I wanted to bring up, because being in a safe position is generally bad in strategy games. The reason being, well, ask yourself, what are you safe from if you sit in a safe position? Being predated by the enemy, you say? My fellow squids, we are the predators. We're playing the game. The game is you hunt them. All you're doing by taking up a safe position is keeping the enemy safe from you, because the same disadvantages that might stop them attacking you stop you attacking them, and the game is about you attacking them, so you're stopping yourself. You're making the game harder. Like, you're not locked in here with them, they're locked in here with us, that sort of mindset. So yes, being in the middle of the chaos, like just in the middle of a huge block of territory, is kind of good because you'll have the most targets and get your positive feedback loop going faster. Being in a thin strip of stars away from everything else will actually be a problem because there are just no things to interact with in two directions, so you'll expand slower. Let's go and live out that problem right now then. By the way, I hated this game's music, and I turned it off, like right at the beginning. I'll throw in some other space games music in the background, but yes, this isn't the actual music. I don't remember why the music was intolerable, I just really hated it for some reason. Just play some ambient droning sounds in the background, that's all I ask. That's what I ranted about in my previous video on Total War Pharaoh. The beginning of a Distant Worlds 2 campaign is really comfy, on the default settings at least. Yes, I should mention that all the settings for this game are on default. There is an amazing selection of things to customize your campaign with, but for commentary purposes I took whatever the quote-unquote developer intended path was. With the exception of bumping the difficulty up to hard. What does that do? Well, you must know by now, if you're an Offie regular, that I had a whale of a time not knowing what the difficulty levels do, and I'm going to deduct points for that. It's just cheating in some way, I presume, and we'll have to leave it at that. Developers, just spit it out, okay? Just tell us what it does. We can take it, even if it's embarrassing. Anyway, I was saying the start is very comfy. It's because you begin only controlling a single planet, and you don't even have technology good enough to leave its orbit. So like you can't do anything, you just chill, like you can't play the game at this stage. It's a nice calm before the storm, like this is where it all begins. It's a nice chance to poke around and like look at the UI, just look at stuff, read tooltips, although the fact that most of the stuff doesn't actually do anything at this stage might end up giving you the wrong impression if you try to learn the game from here, so maybe like a trial and error or exploration type learning pattern. isn't the best idea in a game like this. Well, luckily I had played before, so I do have the skill level of someone who half remembers a tutorial seen many years ago, which probably via like the Dunning-Kruger effect means I'm actually worse than a true beginner. What you need to do to start off is research something that lets you leave your planet and just start playing the game effectively. You can skip this part in the setup if you like, because I guess it is technically pointless. We're stuck with this single scout ship. The game has called it the Shabby Scout, which is a bad start. Seems our squid folk have no self-respect. While I poke around, and before we get like flying through space and time and talking about everything that's going to happen, I should explain briefly what this game even is, so that what's about to happen at least makes some sense. If you've ever played one of these 4X space games before, you probably already know what's going on in this game, as this genre is really narrow and set in its ways. People call this kind of game a spreadsheet simulator because it's kind of just a nerdy, number-go-up Skinnerbox type game with a space theme slapped on it, and the space theme isn't relevant or really used mechanically in any way. We'll see as we go on. This kind of 4X space strategy game, I feel like it's one of the earliest game genres to emerge, and maybe that's why it's so set in its ways, and all of the games that are like this are really similar and share mechanics. There must have been some kind of cementing effect where the initial successes in this genre, like in the 80s, started being copied by everything and became the defining pillars of the genre. So what this means is, we've got ourselves another game where you're colouring in a big map of dots by colonising planets at the dots with colony ships you have to make. You can put buildings on the planets sometimes there are lines between the stars to mean like transit lanes, whatever those are. It's got some good old-fashioned what-if space warfare was exactly like World War II style military mechanics like all of the games in this genre. But Distant Worlds 2 is actually a standout and unique entry in the space-themed number-go-up Skinnerbox simulator because it has two unique features. Number one, it simulates private capital outside of your control, which actually runs most of quote-unquote your economy for their own purposes, which is a radical departure from the usual central planning approach of virtually all video games that feature economic gameplay, especially in the strategy genre. So you as the player, you're more like a real-world free market government. The economy is being managed by unknown people in an unknown way, and you just tax whatever happens. It's nice that you don't have to think about fulfilling your people's needs because theoretically somebody else will do it. And if they don't, it's their fault. Your hands are clean, and you can go and play geopolitics and sit at the big strategy table with that money you got. Cynically, it seems this is the best approach actually to making a strategy game, but I guess technically it's less game than doing the usual philosopher king / benevolent dictator type route where everything is yours and your destiny is in your own hands, so like the result of the game is yours, you're in control. It's more game design friendly. I guess the good news is in this game, if there are any problems in my largely automated economy, I can just blame the capitalists and ignore the fact that technically I am allowed to step in if I want to, which is probably a familiar coping method to many real-life governments as well. How immersive. Unique feature number two, not only is this private economy running itself, if you like, you can have the government run itself as well. This game allows massively customizable automation options for everything in a fine-tuned way where every single mechanic you decide who makes the decisions on it. It's the ultimate I don't want to do this game, where if there's some aspect of the game's mechanics you don't like, you can turn off like just that one thing by essentially in-universe you're sending your underlings to manage it for you. And this applies to every single mechanic individually, allowing you to ultra-customize what you as the player are actually going to be doing in the game, like what your role in the government is. So you can make a 4X experience that you specifically want to have. And that idea is just sensational. Does it actually work? Well, we're going to talk about it, okay? Like, to begin with, all I'll say is it's an amazing set of features. I found myself using it and tweaking it a lot as I went on. We'll have to now see how both of these unique features in Distant Worlds 2 actually emerge in the game as we go on, because nothing's really happened yet. We're positioned in the southeast of the galaxy, on the ring, and we can see that another faction has started right beside us, the yellow area out there, so we'll have to decide how to deal with that soon enough. But in the meantime, what am I actually doing as the player? Due to that private economy and automation setting stuff, the economy is building itself slowly in the background, which in practice means that the private economy is buying mining ships and freighters from me to go and mine resources, then sell those to the planets according to the planet's needs, which is all simulated and tracked in the background. You can look at it, but I didn't for the most part. The details of it are infinite, so we'll skip them for now and maybe come back to this. What's simpler is the main source of decision making for me right now, and that is research. Yes, we've got the standard approach to technology in this game genre. That means the government controls all research, has a finite pool of things they can research, and I don't exactly know how this could be done, but I'd love to see the spirit of that decentralized economy applied to make some kind of more wishy-washy research system, with possible private sector elements as well. Probably really complicated and ungamey, like unsatisfying to implement, but I'd be interested to see something. Maybe it could work. As for the texts themselves, I didn't really remember which ones were useful from my previous playthroughs, so I had to sort of go through it all and just read stuff. There's a lot to go through in the tech tree. It's absolutely massive. It can be very hard, though, to make value judgments about what you should get. So allow me to go off here on what's secretly happening in the background with techs. And this is a rant for which there is no footage, and this is one of these cases where that is the point. Like, I'm going to be talking about something the game doesn't tell you, but is very important, so just put up with some B-roll as I rant. A lot of the techs you can get make you huge amounts of money, but you'd never know it, and it doesn't tell you that's what they're going to do. Because how the game works is, if you invent a new ship part, the game might decide to upgrade the civilian ship designs in your empire, and that forces the private companies in your empire, like simulated in the background, to come to you and buy those designs off you for an unspecified amount. I think I pointed this out when I first played the game. It leads to a load of confusion in the economy, because it creates this almost shadow economy where the game doesn't really report on this happening, but you are selling things to people on the side, like you've got this side business to the government, where the state is controlling all asset production, and the capitalist part is just that the capitalists are allowed to own the assets after they buy them and use them for their own profit after that. We're going to need another political science PhD call-in to come and give a word to what this economic model could be called. You're free to privately own part of the economy in a capitalist sort of way, but all the assets you use have to be purchased from the government monopoly. So you can start a coffee shop, but you can only use the government's coffee machines, chairs, building designs, just everything. Meaning, entrepreneurship becomes a massive money-making scheme for the government, which is good for us. In-game, this has the effect of making your budget sheets and income predictions extremely inaccurate, because this business you're running isn't factored in to what the game tells you about your economy. But your bank balance does still have the money in it. You do get the money. So if you're in the early game and you're constantly inventing new things and selling new designs regularly, your bank balance is just doing whatever it wants, independent of your tax income or your trade income, the normal ways the government is supposed to be making money. And you can even decrease the amount of money you have, because if you invent a part that state-owned ships like the military want to use, they also have to come to the government monopoly and buy it. And even though you're buying it off yourself, you still lose the money, because economics. You can gain and lose money, just kind of randomly, it seems. To you, it will seem you're gaining and losing money randomly, because you don't know when these sales are happening or why. So it's very unsatisfying to try and manage your economy in the early game, because it's just doing its own thing. I would probably try to simplify this with some kind of hand-wavy thing where we're going to kind of collate everything together. We're going to say the government capital outfitters megacorporation is just paying the government a monthly dividend based on its company value, and that can be put on the balance sheet, something like that, leading to a more gradual rise and fall in a clearly tracked monthly income modifier, so that your government innovations are still making you money, but in a nice presentable fashion you can understand and use in your economic strategy. That's the key. Hello guys, welcome to a video game where we're talking about monthly dividends from a government monopoly on heavy industrial equipment. It's the Soviet dream right here in Distant Worlds 2. Because as boring as that may sound, the game already has the annoyance and complication of actually working something like this. It's only the potential fun and engagement in doing that is then thrown away by just not telling you very much about it. So long story short, I'll be getting some techs, and my economy will be almost completely disconnected from what I'm actually doing, or what economic levers under my control I'm playing with, usually because of this big secret economy happening in the background. And I think a certain portion of players of this game probably never realize that's even a feature of the game. Things will become more normal, i.e. like in line with what the player-given numbers actually claim, after we saturate the market with our squid Soviet space tractors, and we can take a closer look at all this later on. We're actually a monarchy, by the way, if you wondered what our politics in-game were. I think we have an emperor, and your government type does matter, in that all kinds of buffs are linked to your ruler and rulership system. And rulers can also level up over time, which is good for monarchies, I imagine, because we won't be changing rulers very much. I think we only changed ruler once in the whole campaign, if I remember. We'll see. So, now here's a big question. What am I actually supposed to do in the game? Like, how do I progress? Let's look at that. We gotta colonize some dots. And here we see how that works in a special case, the case where a dot is already colonized. Many factions in the game are classed as independent, meaning they aren't playing the game, they won't try to conquer the galaxy. And as you might guess, the goal of the game is to conquer the galaxy. You can win by having loads of population, by having loads of colonies, by having loads of area controlled. There are various categories, but you might note, they're all actually the same thing. You do the same thing to advance them all. You need to colonize as many dots as you can. And if you can't do it anymore, you need to kill off other dots, and then the Great Council of all the Gods will declare you a winner. But yes, with independent factions, you are allowed to send a colony ship to them. And if they really like you, they'll get annexed and become one of your colonies. To make them like you, you bribe them, like pure as that. That's basically the only thing you can do for the most part, but let's save such discussions for a diplomacy rant later on. Taking a colony like this is way better than making your own colonies because it starts pre-built, i.e. it has some number attached to it. The big question is, does any given colony make you money? That's what you're looking for in the colonial system. In the non-shadow economy respect, that is, can you tax whatever pitiful creatures live on any given rock you throw your flag at? That's what we're doing in the game. I've already colonized a few lumps around my starting planet, and they all suck. You'll find that colonies generally just lose you money, for reasons again that we have to throw out to the political scientists perhaps. I'm not quite sure what's going on, but maybe we pay some sort of UBI to our citizens. The government's paying in some way for the colonies to operate, and then you tax some of it back, but I don't know, if there's not enough people, you for whatever reason don't make enough back, but also the amount of people doesn't seem to affect how much you have to pay to upkeep them. I don't know what we're doing down there, but you have to wait. That's the mechanical implication. Your planets have a development stat, a stat called development, which will go up according to something or other, which we'll have to rant about later. We can't rant about how planets actually work without ranting about some other things, so we'll have to save it for later. Let's look at our menu here, our colonial menu. The main thing, like I'm doing in the game, the main decision to make, is to look down our list of planets that we could colonize, and give the order for some to get started. There are some criteria which will help you decide which ones to pick, and again I'll have to rant about that later for various reasons. First, let me just say something nice about how this all works. It's so gloriously automated. It's exactly what I've wanted from so many mechanics in so many games. That being, we're boiling the mechanic down to just the decision making. All I have to do is say, colonize this place, and your economy will automatically find people for it. It will find the right people, the best people for it, and there are different kinds of people you can send, it does matter. It will find somewhere to build the ship, it will design the ship, it will wait until you have enough money to buy all of the parts of the ship and put it together for you. It will then give all of the movement orders and the loading and unloading of colonist orders for you. There are 0 stages between you saying, I want this one, and eventually seeing a notification saying the colony has been established. This is perfect because in a normal game, where you make your settler unit manually from a given place and then you move it turn by turn with orders every time and tell it what to do, tell it when to start the colony. Civilization, I'm imagining here apparently. All of those middle stages are really easy, they're kind of pointless, they're kind of boring, and I always advocate that the rewarding part of this process revolves only around the decision making, your initial decision to make the move, and then new moves you can make based on the options the completion of that old move gave you, which in this context just means deciding you want a colony and then doing something with it. In Distant Worlds 2, colonies are pretty useless, so we have to skip pretty far ahead to get to the next decision, and that's exactly what the game does. So, while the gameplay for Colonization has been distilled down to practically nothing, like you could call this bad, I think it's great. You don't need to look at your colonies until 50 years after you ordered them to be started, because maybe by that point, they've gotten useful enough to make a unit or build a trade hub or something, and all of the intermediate steps, which are just kind of nothing, but like technically would be part of the game in another game like this. Well, I'm just happy for them to go. Like, it doesn't need to tell me, don't forget to develop the agriculture on this planet this turn. Like, that middle part of gameplay is gone. We're just going to say it happened, because it doesn't really matter. Well, I say it's gone. It's still there. You can actually go and do all of that stuff. You can micro, like, planets every day if you want to. It's just playing itself if you don't. Your governors are microing taxes and are trying to get the growth rate up and are microing immigration, deciding what buildings to make. Although in my automated setup, I had all building turned off, because most of the buildings in the game are geared towards military stuff, and I was going for the highest possible risk build of basically having no military whatsoever, in order to get money for other things, which we'll look at later on, like what the things you need money for are, what I was thinking of doing here. So, my colonies, they are doing nothing, but somebody in the background is changing the tax rate every day to try and like optimize how many people move there and stuff. So, we finally got a case of a complexity of the game being removed, which makes the game more complex. They've taken away some decision making that I would normally have to make in a quote-unquote normal version of this game design. But because I don't have to do that, I can do something better instead. There's always something more to do in these games, and yes, automation, this is the answer. This is why I'm sort of a champion of this game, even though I'm happy to sit back and be like, well, here's 1,000 things about this game that suck. The spirit of this game is just like the spirit I always wished was in every other game that is like this. So, again, this is going to be another, this is the worst game ever, this is the best game ever type of commentary where it's not clear whether I like anything or not. Well, I came back and played the game. I didn't have to do that, did I? So I clearly like it enough, or I like the idea of it enough. Now, I wanted to move on to the topic of the military, which I mentioned before, because we can see here I've got various military ships doing something or other in my little empire. And this is where I first began to conflict with the automated systems I've been gushing over so much. I have to put my foot down and say that the way the game approaches automating your military is absolutely horrendous, and I battled with the fleet and ship and troop automation for the whole campaign. I could never get it to automatically do what I was thinking of having it do, but it was also very difficult to do the things I wanted to do manually, so I was just wishing the automation would work in a certain way, and we'll be getting to that, of course. I found I always had to make compromises to get the game to do what I wanted. And I felt like what I wanted was simple enough that it should have worked, and well, you'll have to see whatever I say about that later to judge whether that's true or not. The basic primer only for now is going to be, if you leave your military to its own devices, it will spend all of your money, so you need to step in and make sure you give personal approval for every purchase they want, or you order the automation system to ask you whether they can buy things, not to buy things on their own. You need to adjust the default settings, that's what I'm saying essentially. You need to be able to deny the military the ability to make ships, to deny them the ability to upgrade ships whenever they want, to deny them the ability to recruit ground armies to defend colonies, and you can fiddle with their overall budget as well, which we'll look at later, the budgeting system, which I quite liked actually. Already, we do have a load of ships sailing around because I was just randomly approving various shipbuilding plans. The AI is happy to take your ships and escort random civilians or guard random spots in small numbers, and this makes my min-maxer shadow economy mastermind quite mad actually, because, well, I'm mixed on this. The game is trying to be clever, it's trying to be helpful, and it's kind of succeeding in what it's trying to do. But this is a trap. I don't want to defend my civilian traffic, and pay for it basically. I want my civilian traffic to be destroyed, because I sell the only possible replacements for the civilian traffic. If someone dies to space monsters or pirates, I get money. It only looks like I lose money because I'm supposed to pretend this shadow economy doesn't exist. Furthermore, what I really get worked up about is this age-old question of whether it's cheaper to defend yourself or take losses. I always love asking this of strategy games. Here, the military gameplay premise for the early game is that various independent factions are pirates, and they'll send ships to randomly steal things from your stations or shoot at your ships. Your automated military AI, on the default settings, will build a bunch of stuff and go to fight them. It will mostly just be guarding against them rather than looking for their bases or anything like that. Single ships will guard various spots, as I said, and it also forms groups of ships into fleets that will sit in certain spots and then respond to pirate raids like emergency services. This sounds so good. This sounds amazing. This is already a technological leap ahead of how other games would approach this. It's really good on paper. But this approach is what I'm going to be slamming throughout this video. I just hated it, and we'll see why, and you'll probably not agree with why. Now, on the topic of pirates first, the pirates will eventually come to you in the diplomacy screen. I say eventually, they'll come to you in the diplomacy screen over and over again to try and get you to stop letting them kill you. In other words, they want you to pay protection money, and this protection money is a recurring fee. You pay $125 per month, or that's what it says it's going to ask you to pay. And I guess you're asked to make a decision there, really, how much is that? How much is this worth to me? How much damage do they do? And that question drove me a bit insane here. I think the first problem with this question is that I don't really have my budget on a monthly basis. We've got that number in the top right, which is just on an unknown time period. Our money is going up and down by some amount, but of course, as we discussed already, it actually goes up and down by radically different amounts to that number. So it's very hard to know what 125 space dollars is worth on a monthly basis. And what we also don't have is the thing we would be comparing this against in the practical decision sense, the cost of making a fleet or maintaining a fleet that would stop the pirates from attacking us. What's the cost of killing them versus the cost of paying them to not kill us? That's the actual decision you have to make, and I found that very hard because a lot of the information regarding that is hard to come by in the game. Information on what your ships cost you certainly isn't front and center. I seem to recall I got some data, but from tooltips somewhere, and my memory is telling me, oh, it's about $150 per unknown time unit, per ship, something like that. This is the kind of elite economic analysis you can do in a game that doesn't really give you the data, and it just begins to tell you what's going on, which we already ranted about with the shadow economy stuff. I think it takes a certain amount of experience or external to the game research to engage with these decisions. It asks you to make right up front near the start of the campaign over and over again. If it at least gave you all the info to make the decision with, then I think my only complaint would just be why is it a static price? All pirates charge you the same amount throughout the entire game. It's just this random flat fee you have to pay to not be killed by any given pirate base. It's a bit arbitrary and hard-coded. How did they intend to balance this? How is this supposed to work? I don't know. The whole pirate system in this game is really weird because they're more technologically advanced than you. So it kind of doesn't make sense for them to exist at all. The conceit of the game is the classic conceit of this genre, where every species in the galaxy invented hyperdrives at exactly the same time, allowing us to have this big, balanced, multiplayer-friendly fight over everything. But the pirates rule everything in the beginning. They control everything first. How? We don't know. We can't talk to them about it because they're just this kind of weird tack-on mechanic on the side. You can actually turn pirates off in the campaign setup, and we've got to give the game credit for that. That's an excellent move, because that's exactly what I would have asked for if that wasn't there. So they've preempted my complaints, it seems, but yes, I'm falling prey to playing on the default settings, forcing myself to do things I don't want, just to complain about them. That's the offity Game Grounds way, I suppose. The place all of this is coming from is that I think by the very end of the campaign, I had monitored some of these stats and kind of manually started to work out what's going on with the economy and what some of the reporting actually means. The obvious case is in the top right where it's reporting your income with no time unit attached to it. I think I'd gone through and monitored it closely enough to work out what it was. I actually can't remember what it is now, but I remember the lesson I learned, which is that the pirate protection money, it's practically free. in comparison to the cost of killing them anyway. That's what I really mean here. Like, you do have to pay for something, but if you wanted to not pay and actually contest them, that would cost you way more. And if you do pay the pirates, they'll like you, and they can become your allies, and you can annex them, or they'll give you protection for free, or give you fuel and stuff. But even more interesting than that, if that wasn't interesting enough for you, is that it's possibly a net positive to let them kill you, because every death means another customer at your door, like secretly, but not really secretly. Like, you do get those customers, but we're just pretending we don't, I guess, because maybe the UI and the game flow was designed before the shadow economy mechanics and just it wasn't factored in. I don't know. It feels like everything that's going on here with the pirates is just slipping under the game design radar, because everybody would just assume that the game wouldn't work like it does now, or it shouldn't work like it does now. Technically, you can also play the game without knowing anything about it, which probably helps it slip under the radar as well, and I think you probably won't know anything about it if you just looked at it casually. I kind of hate that I'm here complaining about this extremely pointless and niche thing. It's so lame, but it did bother me, basically, which compels me to vlog my bother for the record, if only to make my bothered state bother you, thus passing on the curse. Can any experts weigh in on what's going on here? For me, it was really hard to determine the truth of like how the pirate economy works and what the right choice is. So I'm going to leave the speculation here. You know what? Just turn the pirates off. That's going to be my recommendation, because, I don't know, everything about them just made the game a little bit more confusing, and maybe it's also kind of exploiting the player's favor if you really look at it closely, but also don't look at it closely. That's my other recommendation. Look at all the annoyance I've had to go through to pass my bothering curse onto you. Never bother yourself with how the pirate protection money system works. Let's move on. I really wanted to stop ranting about how I think the game works without having any relevant footage, or without talking about the current stuff in the game. However, there is something that's now important enough to the campaign that it needs to be covered before we move on, and that's resources. But as a mercy, let me say something about my actual campaign specifically here for a tiny break from the rants. Construction ships. I'm overdosing, baby. I built loads of construction ships in the early game. Those being ships that go and set up mines on your non-colonized dots for your private economy to interact with. This was because I was mistakenly remembering how construction ship mechanics worked in another 4X game, no doubt. I think it was Galactic Civilizations. I would have been thinking that construction ships are consumed if you use them, and if you want to make more mines, you need to make more construction ships. So I was spitting them out, and at some point I realized that, but not before I had something like 30 just sitting around. I have no idea how much that cost me throughout the campaign. I didn't check. The one upside was that when my territory did reach out into new areas, if there were like 20 things that could be mined, they would all be mined immediately, so we'd set up very quickly, and we're paying some premium to be able to do that. We don't know what it is. It's probably for the best that we don't care what it is. Now this brings us to resources, because that's what the mines are making. Let's play imagination as I describe how I imagine the game's economy works, not shown here, and perhaps it is for the best the player doesn't really see any of the stuff I'm going to be talking about now. There is this set of like 30 commodities which your private economy is trading all over the place. Every planet, or everything you can put a mining base on, usually asteroids but sometimes gas giants and other things too, will produce a certain amount of one or two of this set of commodities. How much it makes is based on some kind of purity percentage, I think, and on planets it might be based on other things. I didn't look into that at all, and I'll recommend against looking into it, of course. Now, your stations and planets will require certain amounts of these commodities to operate. They're constantly consuming them. I presume, at least. There are certain things you can buy, like certain techs and certain units, that require you to have specific resources with impossible to remember names because there are loads of them. But I presume also your planets just consume them in the background to keep that economy going, right? You know, question mark. Probably. We are constantly buying things from the private economy, or other parts of the private economy are buying things from each other to simulate that logistics, and it's trying to get the supply of any given resource up to a certain level in any given location. I'm not 100% certain, actually, that commodities aren't considered free in the economy. I don't know. You can look up the quantities and prices and supplies and demands and freighter routes and all the details of this It is available for analysis, so it's not completely hidden as I imply. It's just that you'd probably have to not value being sane to actually look at it or, well, even think of what you could do with it. I don't know what I would do differently if I knew all of this stuff, because the solutions to all of the logistics problems you face kind of need to be solved automatically, like without your input as well. So like even if you knew there was a problem, you would just wait and see if it solves itself. Well, look into that if you like. If you want to dodge a draft, so you need to ruin your mental health, go and work out how Distant Worlds 2 economy is actually working. If you have a planet that needs commodity 14 in quantity X, private merchants will find that in your empire somewhere and bring it to them. They make a trade. I don't know if you lose money in that trade or whether you gain money in that trade or whether money changes hands at all, or it might just be the commodity. The planet will then store certain amounts of commodities for the future. All of this is happening invisibly to the player under the default UI settings. The game isn't going to tell you to sort out resource shortages. That's the big point. It never interrupts you with information about the economy. You're not quote-unquote supposed to care about it. In fact, I don't think you ever get informed about anything in the resources system, even though it's quite complex. Like, it never comes to you. There's one notable exception I remember, which is that if a planet doesn't have enough resources to build something, it gets grayed out, and there's a tooltip that will say, you can't build this because it lacks commodity 13, 24, and 6 in these quantities. This only ever happened to me with new colonies which don't have any resources if you try to build a spaceport like right away. Spaceports are essential in this automatic economy we're imagining because they deal with the toing and froing of goods from the planet and provide storage and also a load of other random things like disease treatment and happiness buffs. If I remember right, there's even this other shadow economy specifically to do with your spaceports where you can have like private hospitals and tax people to go into them or something, or you can have like holiday resorts. I forget, I think I'm half remembering this from the manual. Let's not even go down that rabbit hole, but yeah, all of my spaceports were being built automatically by the AI because I had the designs automated, so maybe my advisors were running some sort of crazy private hospital system down there to make me some cash. I don't know. Well, the point is, you have to wait for freighters to dump things into planets before you can build things. That's the only time it sort of interacts with the player, this mechanic, if it's all going fine. So now you know. All of this stuff not pictured here is taking place. There's a massively complex system of supply and demand being managed with hundreds of supply depots, thousands of merchant ships going all over the place all the time. I presume this is a big reason why the original release of the game had performance issues. The interesting thing, though, is that you can go the entire game without ever noticing any of this happens. I mean, you will have noticed my footage isn't anything to do with what I'm talking about. It can't be, and it won't be for the whole commentary, which is a testament to how well automated the system is. You don't have to look at it at all. It works. Amazing automation. And I guess I should be happy with that, right? Like, this is good. It is an achievement. The game has saved me the headache of playing the game once again. It's only we've come full circle here because we've created a logistics system that's so perfectly automatic that it only extremely rarely causes the player to react or interact with the mechanic at all, or know the mechanic is there at all. Philosophically, we've now created a mechanic that is indistinguishable from its own absence. The game would be exactly the same if there were no resource logistics mechanics whatsoever, and all the mines did was give you money in the abstract. Technically, there'll be some niche cases where that would be different, but generally it won't be, and specifically for the campaign I played, it was no different. Like, we never ran out of any resources. I never had to do something because I needed X resource, so it had zero impact on my campaign at the very least. It's like the game has this deep ocean economy. It's so deep, but we're flying in a plane over the top of that ocean, and it feels the same to fly over the deepest ocean in the world as it does to fly over the shallowest puddle. Like, we're just not interacting with it. So, okay, does it need to work like this? That's what I'm going to ask. I'm imagining Distant Worlds 2 Light, Diet Distant Worlds 2, where it only tracks, like, fuel, food, and money or something, and drops the 27 other things. I feel like everything would just be exactly the same, only the game would cost less money to run because your CPU isn't stressing out over how Station 7 at Planet 12 needs 14,000 metric pocketfuls of hypergallium only found at the bottom of the sea on planet 4, which is 17 warp jumps away, and then the merchants are all busy being refit at Ophides Space Megacorp because he released his yearly upgrade to the Freighto cargo components. Now with cup holders but without universal charging ports, adapters sold separately, only at Ophides Space Megacorp. And here I am at the very top, just looking down on all this and being like, my income is negative, but my balance is going up. The economy must be great. Which, as someone pointed out on my original video, is a pretty good government view of the economy simulator. So that's good. A lot is going on, but nothing is happening. Distant Worlds 2. That's it. So again, I put the question to anyone who might know, what is the deal precisely with the economic complexity? Most of all, was I supposed to be doing something with it? That's the big question. What matters about it? Like, I ignored it. Did I lose out in some way by ignoring it? If the mechanic was deleted entirely, would the game lose out? I guess it is fun to know that a complicated system is running itself for you in the background. You might feel grateful or immersed that these things are being simulated in an authentic feeling way. But since this is a so-called game, is a mechanic that the player can't all caps play with really that important? Well, that's my rant. Moving on for now, let's get into the state of the campaign and talk about some of this mythical gameplay we're all dreaming of at the moment. We're starting to run out of free real estate, or real estate we can bribe into joining us. We've got that yellow section beside us up north, and I was mainly going in the other direction to avoid being mean to them. I didn't want to have a military, so I was avoiding the classic just kill the guy right next to you strategy. That means we've been going southwest, and there we've encountered a green faction, so we're running out of space there. They were expanding in our direction as well. I could see them taking colonies and invading independent colonies near us. So soon we're going to be out of colonial options. One thing I can do is clear out a few more systems in my interior by sending my terrible little military to destroy space monsters. Yes, this is the classic mechanic that stops you positive feedbacking quite so hard you see in a lot of these expandathon video game designs. You can't use certain systems until you kill a load of stuff, forcing you to invest some money and effort and slowing you down early on. In Distant Worlds 2, this can of course be done entirely automatically, but turning off fleet formation and fleet management automation is absolutely key, I think, in this game, because the way the AI runs the military is terrible, as mentioned prior. We'll talk about that another time. Let's stick with colonies. That's what we're thinking about right now. That means, unfortunately, we've got to talk numbers. In your menu of available colonies, each one is given a suitability rating. As the game notes, it's too low if it goes below 20. This rating means the ability to support at least one species in your empire. I should note that yes, you become multi-species really early on, much faster than in, say, Stellaris, because the colonies you bribe onto your side can have any species living there. And I probably also have open borders with the yellow faction, so I can steal their people, basically. Their species will want to live on my planets, but our core species, the squids, won't want to live on theirs, so I like to imagine I get net positive migration from yellow. You can actually go and look at the numbers if you want, but I didn't. We're going vibe strategy all the way, baby. Now, we can colonize anything that has 20 or more suitability points. You are allowed to go below 20, I should say. It's just that you will never make any money, so maybe you shouldn't. But you might want to make a terrible colony just to claim territory, or to put a military base somewhere, or to get your colony count up because it helps with the victory conditions. There are other things to think about. A nice, real-world, strategic consideration to make there. I think for the most part I avoided it though. The big issue I had was potentially a me issue, potentially a UI issue, and now we're going to get into it. A planet has an attribute called quality. And for a while, I thought that number was telling you the suitability, or that suitability and quality were the same thing, like just called different things under different UI context or something, or they were the wrong way around. Something. I remember that I suspected there was a difference between these named attributes, and I thought I had made a mistake, but I couldn't work out if I was wrong, because the suitability stat of an already colonized world is really hard to find, whereas quality is what's openly advertised. And I at some point convinced myself that quality was some function of suitability or they were the same in some way. I was poking at worlds being like, well, it says this thing has 54% quality, so that means it's really habitable, right? It's like more than 50%, so it's above average. But quality is actually a stat that I guess, feeds into the colonial development level, another stat, which in some way affects tax income. So it's all basically a proxy for how much money it will make. However, suitability is also a proxy for how much money you will make, and it's not shown, which allows high-quality planets to do badly for a technically unspecified reason, the reason being that the air isn't breathable or something, like, you know, a big reason that should be readily reported on. But I think you can only see suitability in a tooltip of a certain UI element. In fact, I went to look at it, so let's go even deeper. Here's a screenshot. It's UI UX complaints time. Let me show you what I didn't like about this. This is Voloptia 3, a planet with 56 quality. If you mouse over the thing that tells you it's 56 quality in the bottom left, it says suitability plus 21 for the worst species of all time, the humans, which we unfortunately have infecting our empire already. Now what this said to me is that its quality level stat is increasing suitability by 21. But we still don't know what the suitability broadly speaking is, or what it is for other species. However, that tooltip is actually reporting on suitability, which exists independent of quality. Don't be fooled by the fact you only see it if you mouse over the number that says quality. This is the kind of thing that makes me a bit mad. Is suitability also a function of quality? That is implied by this UI design to me, but I don't know if it is even now. Real maths talk now we're getting into. When I say, like, is X a function of Y, I mean, does quality actually change suitability? Does development change suitability as well? Because that's like so plausible that it would, that the fact that it probably doesn't is kind of an issue with the game. Like, that 124% is our development that I keep referring to, by the way. And you might ask, what does it mean to be 124% developed? Like, is there an extra 24% of a city built on top of every finished city or something? Like, why do we even call this a percentage if it can go over 100? Shouldn't it just be a rating or a score? Look, I was mad about this, now it's your problem once again. I think how these numbers interact needs to be explained via the medium of just laying them out differently, having a UI scheme that implies their relation and emphasizes what's important for any given decision. So the gameplay problem that's arising from this is that what that plus 21 suitability thing is actually saying, in mechanical terms, is that this planet is just barely habitable. Like, that's a massive deal, and it's hidden. It's probably never going to make much money. It also implies it's only habitable to humans. I don't know where the scores for my other species can be found. Maybe it doesn't say anything for other species if there's just no chance of it living there at all. Like, if this planet doesn't have an ocean deep enough for our squids, it doesn't say the squids minus 50 suitability or something. It just says nothing to keep the tooltip small, I guess. Well, this should have been an entire thing. Like, we saw the planet had an extensive fold-out menu of numbers that doesn't include suitability or potential suitability for other species you might bring into the Empire. And that's just burying things even further, burying this key information. This colony I've made is just about the worst possible colony you can make, but the UI makes it look pretty okay. With 56% quality and 124% development, that sounds above average and above perfect, respectively. Like, right? Wrong. That plus 21 meant 0 plus 21 equals 21, where 20 is the lowest number that is allowed to make money. So let's subtract 20 as well. The colonial rating is 1 out of a maximum of, say, 80. This colony sucks. It was actually an independent colony in this case, so at least I didn't choose this planet. It seems the independent humans somehow evolved on a planet they can't breathe the air on, or they colonized it by accident in the mythical pre-game civilization that we're ignoring for lore purposes. I don't know. I might even still be wrong in my interpretation of these numbers. Like, now that I've just told you what I think it means, you can tell me otherwise. The big issue, though, whether I'm right or wrong, is that there should be no question at all. We shouldn't be talking about this. I'm certain that I confused quality to be the kind of baseline of suitability, and then the other numbers are modifying it because they had numerical operators on them, like plus and minus. So in this case, I would imagine the suitability is 56 plus 21, because that's what it said, quote unquote. It's 67, like, it's decently above average. This planet is good. No. You know what, mechanically, maybe it should work like that. Like, this justifies having quality be this other thing it's bothering to specify in the first place. It makes sense that a planet having general qualities like average gravity, average wind speed, average radiation, things like that, would make it suitable to a lot of different life forms that statistically also came up on the evolutionary tree on average worlds. The more I think about it, the more this makes so much sense that maybe that actually is how the game works. Like, surely that's how it works, right? I don't know. Suitability, hell of a drug. I made some stinker colonies in the beginning. I believe I disbanded at least one of them after further looking into how I thought suitability worked. And going back to strategy, I need to colonize all of the terrible locations left over now just to aid in my upcoming contest with one or more of my neighbors, where I'm still going to be holding off on making a military as long as possible in order to farm more cash for various things, and I'll tell you what I was using all that cash for later. But the conclusion of my rant is, I think the way the game presents suitability, and maybe the way the game calculates where suitability is coming from in the background, needs a fresh look. I'm sure it's simple enough. It's just the presentation that confused things here, or it was my expectations, I guess, combining with the presentation, so it should just make it as foolproof as possible. That should always be the case for everything, but here was one example of it actually becoming a problem because I was too much of a fool. So yes, we've got to the point when we have to do something about our neighbours, and while just consuming them is the usual thing, and probably still the best thing, I had this little opening that I could use to allow me to do something more stupid. I'm going to start colonizing through the Yellow Empire, and it begins here, as there was an independent colony in the middle of their territory, which I was able to bribe and colonize myself. That planet, Horizon I think it was called, became one of my primary planets in the Empire over time, because perhaps of its trade links with Yellow, like they're going to be beyond good right there. I don't know, that place became really developed over time. It also comes with the Securan species, I think it was called that, which are like humans but hotter, and they'll help us fill out population space on a load of terrible planets across the galaxy. Securans are one of the rare species that's hard to get. There are like 10 normal species and 10 rare ones, and the rare ones might live only on a single planet. Generally, the playable species are the normal ones, and you'll get all of them with minimal effort. Anyway, so now I have this outpost in Yellow's empire that is hopefully close enough to my territory that my economy will be supplying it and I can refuel there to go further afield. Now, the other trick we'll pull is buying a load of infrastructure from Yellow to support this. Because Yellow had built a load of mines in territory that is now considered mine, I am allowed to buy those mines for a set fee, which I certainly will because I presume I make money from this. Again, it's hard to say, like, do I sell the resources to private traders if I buy these mines? I imagine I do. I like to imagine I do. The game doesn't indicate that's what's going on, but yeah, it's probably good, I shrug. Forking over an amount of money which I have no frame of reference for might have been several years of GDP, like depending on what the income numbers actually mean, what the time units really are. It's a fun gamble. The trading system is really neat in this game, I think, because it attaches a context-specific value to loads of things you can give people instead of money. So certain techs will get a value based on how hard it is for them to get, I presume, or how useful it is to them. I never worked out how it actually works. The value of techs goes up and down all over the place, and I think techs that you have might be worth less to anyone you give them to if you just have a lot of other techs as well. It's some sort of balancing trick going on there. Might be as simple as that. Tech trading is something you can disable in the campaign setup menu, and I can see why they added that option, because the ability to buy techs from the hapless AI is very powerful if the AI isn't also doing it. As in, if you go around all the factions and either buy everything they've researched or trade it for something you have, you end up having 12 factions worth of research, and all of the other factions only have like theirs and yours, so they have 2 factions worth of research. and you have a gigantic advantage for having done that. The AI must do the same to keep up. I don't think it does, but in practice, it doesn't work out like that. This is a much weaker technique than it sounds like, for the simple reason that the AI very much tends to research the same thing at the same time. Like, they're all going to have the same tech tree, so you don't get a diverse selection by going to all of them like this. I say this because I was checking what techs people had for sale constantly in my attempts to buy my way forward, and everyone always had the same, like Planetary Shield Level 2 coming up for sale at the same time. So it feels to me that the AI just has a kind of set path through the tech tree it's going for, or they're all basing their decision on the same information in some way. But yes, I did get some extra techs through that mechanic, and more importantly, I bought a load of space stations from Yellow to cement myself in their territory. And then my circumvent Yellow plan is made even more viable because I got a military refueling plan with them, which basically means the jump range of my empire will now be based on their economy, meaning colonizing the empty space to their north is perfectly viable for me. So my colony ships can go over there without being stranded, and perhaps more importantly, the freighters in my economy will be able to do so. Achieved by purchasing fuel from Yellow-owned stations. How much will that cost me? Well, the Great Council of all the Gods laughs at you for asking this question. We will never find out such forbidden knowledge. I will simply assume it's going to be worth it for me, based only on the fact I didn't immediately go bankrupt after doing this. You know, just like how that rock that prevents tiger attacks, which I bought, must be good value, because I haven't been attacked by a tiger yet. Vibes, strategy, vibes, strategy, vibes, strategy. You might also have seen I got a research treaty with Yellow, and what that does is... And that's what I know about that. You can also get a mining treaty or an exploration treaty, and that's what I know about those. My point being that in this game, for all its stuff written in tooltips, it could really use some info on what the deals you can make with the factions actually do specifically, or even just like at all. Sometime in the late game I discovered I have a certain amount of science points being generated by research agreements. So, in some way, it makes your techs go faster. I don't know, like, why couldn't it tell me that? What's the secret here? The annoying part of the secret is that one presumes it also gives tech to the other party. And I'm thinking, well, I have a bigger science economy than them, so if I get a research agreement, does that mainly make science flow from me to them? Could I actually lose science in this deal? Or am I just empowering another faction that might use it against me? Like, these kind of questions can't be asked because you just don't have any information whatsoever. There's a real gameplay impact to just not saying what stuff does. It's probably in the manual, but you know, there's a lot of space on this screen that I'm looking at actually while playing the game. So wouldn't it be better to write it there? Here's a question for you. Another similar question was from the Green faction. They kept asking for mining agreements. It's kind of annoying because you can't permanently disagree to a proposal. So if you say no to the AI for something, it will just ask you again and again because its AI wants that deal. Reminds me of the old Total War AI, which I think used to do something similar to this. At least in this case, it's not so annoying because when the AI sends you a deal, if you just don't respond or don't look at it, that's the same as saying no. So I was considering this mining deal offer in this case, but of course I don't know what it does. I was probably looking for the ability to build my state-owned mines in their territory, because all the mining points in my territory are covered by my infinite fleet of construction ships mentioned earlier. But it might be more like they can send mining ships, the privately owned side of the mining economy, to come and take resources from my territory, and that will probably make me less money than mining it with my private economy or with my state mines, I presume. The other thing to mention about resources, by the way, I don't know how I forgot this earlier, they are finite. So like allowing other factions to mine your stuff might actually screw you over in the very long term. You can run out of those 30 commodities I mentioned, and broadly speaking, the galaxy is doomed in Distant Worlds 2 because there's no technology you can get to relieve yourself of the need for those commodities. Civilization will just stop, like everything in the game will stop happening after a couple of 100 years, because you'll just use up all of the literal and figurative fuel available. So you'd better complete the game and do whatever the Grand Council of all the Gods is telling you to do before then. Better make sure you win before the game ends. And once again, I suddenly feel another, oh, I guess that's how real governments see it too moment coming on there, so we better move on quickly. Here's one of those mythical things I'm spending all the money on. It's terraforming. You can pay a buttload of money to improve the suitability score of a planet by a couple of points. But offy-d, you cry, it says there on the screen that it improves quality, not suitability. Isn't that supposed to be a different thing? My response to that would be to scream, but my work-from-home housemate might be in a meeting right now, so all I'll do is say that I claim in actuality that terraforming changes suitability and not quality. I don't know why I so strongly believe this. I might have just made it up, or it might be that quality and suitability really are interchangeable as I originally falsely believed. Well, maybe not falsely, maybe they're linked functions of each other or whatever I was talking about before. Look, the money's gone, maybe a number went up, I don't know what number, I don't know what it did, I just can't reiterate enough that the money is gone. And again, another real government moment is upon us. We've now got our border with Green pretty much established. They like us, so we won't be doing any defences or anything like that. We'll just leave our colonies to cook for now. In the north, we've successfully got our foot both in and on the other side of the door, with a new colony in that void that Yellow hasn't moved into yet. However, another faction, Red, is also moving in here, having added a colony nearby, and they are at this time invading the Dayut colony marked there, an independent colony I had given all my money to try and get a foothold here, but that's no longer going to happen. Again, the money is gone, please ignore that nothing appears to have been achieved, and remember to vote for me next time as well, by the way. It's good to be Emperor. Imagine needing to explain Distant Worlds 2-tier economic considerations to the public. I was able to finally get a decent idea of what's happening in the galaxy outside of my little corner, thanks to establishing diplomatic contact with these cat people who live on the far opposite side of the ring. I traded map information and some other stuff with them, and this gives me a rough idea of what the other players are doing. I think there are 12 players, and we can see that only 2 of them are in the middle, which is really bad because it means those 2 have the best position and not much competition. The Rim Empires that don't border me don't matter much, and I didn't really look into them for now. In fact, I was most interested in the Brown faction that appears to control most of the middle. But I don't have diplomatic contact with them, so we can't get much info. I think that means I've never seen any of their ships. We'll meet them later, rest assured. But yes, from the info we have, the galactic northeast is sparsely populated, and that's where my current colonial push is going, so this is good, more fuel for the fire. We don't need to attack anyone quite yet. I should mention again, this is probably a bad move. Like, taking heavily built up planets would probably make me more money than I save by not having a military. And it would look neater, it would shorten journey times, it would make the economy better in difficult to calculate ways, and I guess it's more of a game. Like, it's probably more interesting if you plan on filming your campaign and talking about it on the internet, how about that? But for whatever reason, I was determined not to do anything. I'm pacifist in this run, I don't want to fight. I'm 60% sure that the reason I didn't want to fight was because I was kind of scared of what the military automation was going to do and how it all works. We're going to have to tackle this eventually, let's just keep putting it off for now. Here's something I put off earlier that I will mention now, budgeting. Yes, the excitement builds and builds. Top level budgeting is another thing that is automatic by default, but I wanted to handle myself, mainly to keep the facility and military budgets down to stop the AI from buying stuff for the military, but then I also turned off automatic building and shipbuilding. So basically the state spending is fully locked down at the moment, nothing is happening. The main thing I actually achieved by playing with the budget now is diverting money into the 2 things at the bottom there, colony growth and research. If you have loads of cash, you can make your colonial population grow faster by throwing money at them, and you can make your research go faster too, up to a certain maximum allowed investment that I believe doubles the growth or research rate. So here we have an actual synergy for a pacifist strategy. By not having a military, I can massively invest in population growth, which makes you more money in the long run, so it really is an investment. This will allow me to get richer than similarly sized factions, at least until the planets run out of space and the investments won't be possible or do very much. But you can then invest a theoretically infinite amount into research, thanks to this other crash research big spending mechanic that we'll see later on. So yes, I'm going to have the most fertile domain of all. I'll get more taxpayers earlier, be richer earlier, meaning I will be more technologically advanced earlier. And all that will at the very least make me more potentially powerful than the other Rim factions if I ever convert all that money and tech into a powerful military. The only thing I need to keep this momentum going is to keep good relations with everyone and make sure no one attacks me. Cut 2. The Great Dira territory declaring war on me. They aren't the greatest territory actually, it's the Red faction on the other side of Yellow, who I'm now very much sharing that bit of space with thanks to my new colonies. Them declaring war means they can potentially take loads of my barely built up and utterly undefended colonies, and I thought maybe I will try to stop that. So it's time to mobilize my dusty, neglected, generations behind military to do something about all this. It's time to discuss the military gameplay in Distant Worlds 2. Buckle up. Actually, no, remove those buckles, because my first note is to say that war in Distant Worlds 2 is a slow, logistically focused, preparation focused affair with literally seconds of combat every half an hour, something like that. I don't want to exaggerate too much, but that might be correct. The real challenge is to ensure that I have fleets based close enough to potential threats to do something, taking into account how long it takes to rebase fleets and if I can get enough fuel to move my ships to relevant places. Theoretically, after all that, I guess you need to worry about whether your ships are actually good at fighting, and I think you can go in and design your ships down to the individual components, that old chestnut. I didn't care to do that, so I left it on the default ship designs your advisors give you, and they just come with this power number attached. Another good old-fashioned thing, like you just amass a large number and that's your military. If your number's bigger than their number, you just throw them at each other and you win. You don't really need much gameplay finesse at that level. This is kind of usual for this genre. What I wanted to actually talk about here though is how the military automation runs your glorious space navy if you don't intervene, and show them how it's done basically, because I really don't like what it does on its own. I was frustrated because military automation seems to ruin the spirit of the rest of the game, how the rest of the automation kind of made the player's decision-making front and center. Because with the military side, you cannot trust what it's going to do. That might be the best way to put it. Trust is the key word. Let's get into it. Maybe I'll show you like a spaceship shoot a laser somewhere in this war, but really there's barely any footage of war in this war, so yes, this commentary continues to be extremely boring and irrelevant to the footage as usual. Let's get into it even more, baby. Your spaceships with guns on them are controlled automatically at various levels, with many different levers you can optionally influence or override along the way. Again, I'm going to take you on an imaginary journey here to explain how I think it works, and see if you can ever spot any evidence of what I'm saying in the video somewhere. Let's imagine the journey of an individual ship coming out of a shipyard. What's it going to do? Presuming the player never gives it any orders, it will start doing things on its own. First is the question of whether it should be in a fleet. I covered this a little earlier, like non-fleet ships will do various semi-pointless things, like go and guard a rock somewhere, and then just collect their pay under the radar. Somewhere, you set the percentage of your total navy that should be non-fleet ships. And I remember, even though I don't like them, I did leave some of them out there, because despite being useless, I liked the idea of having this almost shadow navy that was spread out across the Empire in places where even I didn't know where they were. And they could be suddenly called into a fleet and concentrated to surprise myself, I guess, at how strong I really was. This doesn't work because of fuel restrictions, because of jump ranges. You can't just concentrate disparate ships together in this game. It's one of the main things you can't do. I'm just spending money for the privilege of defeat in detailing myself, like invisibly, in the background. Unless my ships get so powerful that one can fend off an attack fleet on its own, which is actually plausible in the end game at least. But yes, I genuinely liked this idea of having ships not be shown in my fleet list or on the UI as a kind of hidden reserve, hidden from me in particular, and unusable too, but still costing just as much as a real fleet. More top quality vibes strategy once again. If we're lucky, our new imaginary ship will be assigned to a fleet instead. Fleets are the tangible part of the military gameplay, insofar as they're on the UI and you can select them, and generally see what they're doing. Fleets behave way more intelligently than single ships, and have loads of extra automation features that make them really cool to use, and theoretically this is where I actually like the fleet system. But I'm trying to make a negative rant here, so let me tell you something about the part of this I didn't like first, and we'll show off the cool stuff in a later war most likely. The source of all my frustration is simply how the AI defines what fleets your empire quote-unquote should have, and what ships will be in them, where the ships will come from, what their role will be. Basically all the stuff in the lead-up to the ships actually being used for a gameplay activity. As ever, that's an automatic thing happening in the background, not pictured here, so let's carry on imagining things. I can only apologise, this has been my least relevant to the footage commentary in a long time, and even I'm getting annoyed now, but it just all must be said so that this stuff is no longer trapped in my brain, apparently. That's the will of the Grand Council of all the gods. The military will determine how many fleets it wants at any given time, dividing them into basically 4 categories: attack, defend, raid, and invade, I think. They'll have different ship preferences and AI behaviour based on what mode they're on. The AI will initiate the fleets on its own by defining and naming them, and then it will look for ships to be in each fleet. And what ships it wants is based on fleet templates, in theory at least. There's this thing that allows you to define standardized formations for every type of fleet the AI can use. It's all very nice. I just didn't use this because if you let the fleets have their templates, it unlocks the true evil of fleet management, where any fleet that doesn't currently have the ships for its templates will start buying them in a way that bypasses the usual purchase approval mechanics. And I was stung and scared off by this very early on, so I didn't explore it really. Suddenly the game can just be like, well, we've decided we want 2 extra defense fleets here and 2 attack fleets here, and it will quietly go and spend all of your money to make that happen, and ignore any upkeep cost issues that might arise from this. And perhaps the biggest problem that caused me to feel bad about this is that it's silent. There's no notification to say we want to do this, there's no notification to say we are doing this, nothing to say the ships are being built, nothing to say they're completed, nothing to say they've moved to this new base. It's all completely invisible to you as the player. The only part you see is A, your money and income will go away suddenly and you'll have to think about why that is, and B, your military might be doing suddenly like 13 different things at once with all your ships, and probably won't be achieving very much. This behaviour is why my flirting with the automatic fleet management ended up being very brief at first anyway. I mean, I think it's good. It's kind of normal that you wouldn't automate the military gameplay, because if the military AI was actually really good and I wasn't making these complaints, wouldn't the player's involvement just become so simple that, like, the game is now just nothing at all for real this time? Like, I'm sort of advocating that at the same time, just saying like, oh, kill those guys and the game will know how to do it. I can trust the AI to use my superior general setup to win a war. But maybe it's not even a video game at that stage. Like, it's a very boring film generator you've created, basically. I guess the game currently is trying to automate and failing. And I'm saying either it shouldn't try to automate or it shouldn't fail. And both could be interesting directions, just that the current situation isn't worth having. There is room for compromise here too, because a lot of things in the game have this middle ground where the AI asks you for permission to do things. And if the fleets could fully integrate with that system as well, I think we might be fine. As it stands, the fleet will ask you, say, to attack a planet. So let's say, I want to attack this planet, do you give me permission? If you enable this permission asking mode. But what it won't do is ask, can I make a new fleet? Like, do you want us to defend this area? It's not going to ask the big questions where I would be saying no. And because the game is assuming your answer is yes without asking, that's what got me mad. I think that's the crux of all this. The silver lining is that the AI you're fighting, the enemy AI, is going to have the same problem. So you can rest assured that probably about half of their military strength is just defending their core against nothing, because the AI likes to do that. They like to spread their ships out and have many different fleets and not concentrate strength together, which makes them quite weak. We'll talk about that later on. Luckily, with all of these problems I'm gesturing at, there is one way I can solve them. I can do something that scholars call playing the game. I can just do the fleet decisions myself, define them myself, make the fleets myself, tell them where to go myself. I could do some sort of gameplay. And I can even give them the fleet behaviors that I want and then partially automate their behavior. And that's what I ended up finding quite satisfying and quite good, but this occurred later on. So we'll get to the positive fleet rant later on, as I said. Actually gathering a fleet together initially, like when you define a fleet, is, out of nowhere now, I'm going to hit you with the biggest criticism I have of the game. Absolutely the worst thing. The most negative feeling I ever had in this game was when trying to just make a fleet, get together, find ships and put them in a fleet. For some reason, this is really hard, or I found it really hard. I think the issue is that the AI melts down if a fleet has any ships that are either A, outside of jump range of wherever it thinks the fleet is, its average position, or if anything in the fleet has no fuel, or just less fuel than other ships in the fleet. Because ships of different designs carry different loads of fuel, and you'll have separate fuel, you can't share them within the fleet. This scenario I'm referring to comes up a lot, / is always the case. So when you first define a fleet, and assign ships into it, they might all be in different places if they're coming from your special shadow reserve fleet I mentioned, or you're just building them at different shipyards all at the same time to be quick. You'll end up having this long lead time because the game won't factor in jump range and stuff when first assembling the fleet. What this means in practice is that they'll try to concentrate the ships together, but a couple of the ships will probably be outside of jump range. They will just try to jump anyway without doing any pathfinding calculations, and that just breaks the whole thing. As in, a ship that can't make it to the fleet in one jump will jump towards the fleet and then just drift with no fuel until it gets there, and the rest of the fleet will be stuck waiting for them, and the UI will claim the fleet is doing something, and only if you go and manually inspect it will you realize what they're doing is waiting to start doing the thing it says they're doing because one of the ships is drifting through the depth of space with no fuel, and all the fleet will know to do about this is just wait and see if it eventually shows up. This takes 10 to 100 times as long as just sort of normally jumping or pathfinding via fuel stations, which I think is what the AI is supposed to do. I don't know, we'll see if we stumble upon examples of these cases I'm referring to. This thing I'm remembering here is this big that's why I'm never going to play this game again moment. And I think there's probably a way to solve that, as in changing the game design, but more specifically, there might be a way in the game as it stands to have the AI work a bit more cleverly and get this done. You tell me how to do this, because I can never play this game again with this issue in it. Even if we just have to turn off fuel or turn off jump ranges as a concept so the AI doesn't have to worry about it, that's fine, absolutely fine. It wasn't worth the trade-off of having jump ranges. I didn't really do any strategy with it, but I did get really frustrated with it when the AI was doing stupid things. It needs to be cleverer, and perhaps the fuel tanker rant I sort of gestured at earlier could factor into this, but we'll factor that in later. There are still more pieces to this puzzle, I assure you. Let's go back to my war for now. I need to organize my military into basically just a blob and go north. I think I made 2 fleets in the end with most of my ships. They took ages to muster. I was absolutely crashing out the whole time during the muster because I was so frustrated. I hated it, passionately. I don't know, it really triggered me for some reason, just not being able to get the ships to just fly to a set rally location and do it cleverly, having to think, oh, I'm going to have to manually move fuel tankers to every single ship, with billions of clicks, and the fuel tankers can run out of fuel as well, they're not quite clever enough to do this. The thing I'm trying to do is so simple strategically, but the gameplay involved is really boring, and that was really dragging me down. That's my point. For perspective here, to help you imagine the slowness I'm referring to, because it's not really going to come across in this video, the campaign lasted about 40 years up to this point. It took 5 years to move my fleet into position for this war. This one move order that I wanted to give has taken a significant amount of the campaign itself. After 5 long years, probably about half an hour of micro and crashing out, it's time to make another gameplay input. Now the next thing has finally happened, the thing I've been trying to get to. It's time to make a strategic decision. It would be like in chess if you had to wait for your pieces to be disassembled atom by atom and reassembled in the next tile before you can have your turn. That's the sort of feeling I was getting from this. I was just tweaking out, waiting for the action here, like a true pacifist. There are 2 enemy planets in the area. One is the enemy's colony they started, and the other is the independent colony they stole from me, quote-unquote, and I'd love to get it back. Both are off to the right of my main territories here, and will go for their regular colony first with half my stuff. The other half will stay behind to defend my colonies from possible attacks from the west. Easy plan, right? Let's see how it pans out. The problem is that some space is thicker than others. There are things the game calls nebulae that severely slow down space travel, and I thought it was the brown clouds you can kind of sometimes see around the place on the map. However, the slowing down effect, extends beyond like the visual presentation of these nebulae, and this caused me some issues. One such place where you are getting a movement debuff turns out to be the little distance between my main base in this exclave and the enemy planet. That's going to slow my invasion down even more. Mixed in with the fact that not all the ships I ordered went via the same route, so loads got stuck in the nebulae from like other directions, and this is all going to be taking a while. In year 7 of the war, the enemy finally attacked me, like they managed to show up. My defending fleet was there because the game tells you whenever the enemy fleets are about to set course for your territory and like where they're going to go specifically. So you just need something vaguely close to cut them off by then sitting where the enemy will land after their warp. Hence, there it was, a space battle. Something blew up, there was a laser. That's the action. My crews missed their kids growing up to participate in that. Now, year 8 of the war, we finally got something to Greer, this target colony. I thought this would be the big payoff, yet it was time to learn some hard truths about ground combat. Theoretically, ground combat is easy. Your fleet has a ground combat number, and planets have a ground combat number. You just have to bring a bigger number to take the planet. Actually getting troops into a fleet is a drama, but again, that's going to be saved for later because it intersects with more fleet automation madness. The big problem I learned very quickly is that the number attached to a planet is a base number, not the number you will face in battle. This number grows according to various things when you actually attack. In particular, the planet might spawn militia units that are only present while under attack, suddenly increasing their number after you launch the invasion. Also, your invasion goes down in weaker waves rather than in its full number, especially if your transports are at the back of a fleet and it takes a long time for them to push through the collision to get to the front and start the invasion, kind of if you look at what's actually going on in detail. Anyway, the point is, we're screwed. After that 8-year journey, the glorious off-ED fleet accidentally throws its troops against an enemy I thought we were going to be stronger than, but nay, probably not helped by the fact that they could have been recruiting troops during that 8-year journey. And now, we're just screwed. We'll gradually lose the troops, we'll have to send the transports back to find more troops. Troops come from your planets, meaning most of my recruitment will be happening back on the other side of yellow. And of course, it's going to be outside of the nebula we're now stuck in, so nothing is going to happen fast. A brief moment of action there as red invades me again back west, dies immediately, then leaves. I could counterattack here, but I don't really want to go after the enemy in space because I lack the ground troops to gain anything from fighting, and fighting costs fuel, and I'm probably paranoid about using fuel. I have no idea how much fuel costs, or like whether it's a problem or whether you need to save fuel, but I was just doing it anyway. Then there's the perhaps real reason to stay still, which is that I didn't want to face the challenges of splitting the fleet in two to make a portion stay on the defensive as I attacked. This is something that I gradually noticed about the game. It's really hard to manage the ships in a fleet once they're in there because of how the UI behavior changes. There's no interface for the ships once they're in a fleet. You can look them up in lists of all your ships, like they're still in other UI interfaces for other contexts. You can do antics with this semi-secret bandbox selection thing that the loading screens occasionally tell you about if you zoom in really close and start like manually selecting ships on the screen. You can make a task group split off from a fleet in this way. It's just a bit difficult. It seems the game and the UI doesn't really want you to split up big fleets, or really to have big fleets at all. You probably should have brought 5 attack fleets on top of each other, and then if you want to split them up once you reach your staging grounds, you've got your 5 UI things to click on and you do it via that. You don't split one into 5 on the fly. But I think it would be better if you could. That's my implication here. Maybe we'll see some examples of me getting mad at that in the game. We'll talk about it later. It doesn't matter very much for now. Actually, I think what I was just saying is relevant for once, because my awareness that I'm wasting my strength immensely by just having these 2 big fleets probably led me to make this suicidal decision to reactivate fleet automation. I want the AI to do the UI stuff for me. I want it to split my fleet into balanced groups so I can go lock down all of the enemy shipyards and have the war be safe for me forever. As my space navy strength is higher than theirs, like by miles, despite all of my avoiding of military spending, they didn't have anything, it seems, when they started this war. And they didn't build ships after the war started, which I did. So I rapidly got stronger than them, and here we are, like we easily defeated them in space, within literal seconds of meeting them. Now I want the AI to organize an invasion of the enemy stuff. I want it to cash in on this, and I want them to find a quicker way to do it than I had found with my attempt before. What actually happens was I waited for about a year, during which nothing happened at all, and it looked like my would-be invasion was still in the assembly hell stage, where who even knows how long it will take for a fleet to be created. So after all that, I decided to hit the diplomacy screen and just peace out. I was able to secure some stations in the deal, although I gave them loads of stuff in return. I'm not really classified as winning this war, despite my massively superior position, as you really have to take planets to get war score. So the enemy can really fleece me to get peace, but it is eventually done. A big disappointment, you might say. However, during those 11 years of nearly eventless war, we did achieve something. Our colonies have been growing and growing, like that was a substantial portion of the campaign we just skipped over. And some numbers were going up the whole time. Because of my space dominance, I was also able to slip a whole load of colony ships past Red's region and into that space up there in the top right of the map. So if you include the colony ships that were still in transit by the end of the war, our empire grew something like 50% during the conflict, and now we're going to experience a sort of post-war boom. We've got tons of potential now. In particular, on the budget screen, you can see I now make enough money to fully fund colonial development and fully fund research progress, meaning we're getting money and tech at max speed right now, or getting the potential to have money. I should say we're spending money on the colonies to get more money out of them later. The other factions probably can't do this, so in the extreme long term, we're starting to gain some sort of advantage, and we've still got more space to colonize. So suddenly, it seems I have some momentum here, and that my pacifistic ways had only been proven more correct by how completely terribly my war had gone, and how all the non-war stuff was going really well in the background. This did rapidly come to an end though, because I had left the fleet controls on automatic, as I said before, so soon I was back in the red. I had to go back and redo previous demilitarization efforts. The AI is probably thinking it wants to defend all this new territory I'm getting, so it's made like 15 new fleets to deal with that. However, I see it differently. I only want this new territory if I don't have to defend it, so I'm not going to defend it. If someone wants to attack it, then I will go and attack their older, better planets, and use that excuse to have those instead. These new areas aren't important, they don't need to be defended. So yes, I'm going to have a fun time reeling in the AI in the background, and while I'm skimming over this process, I absolutely hated this aspect of the game. I really wanted powerful top-down controls over the military, where I set the objectives, just like defend this with $2,500 per month. So aspects, controls being invoked there that interface directly with what the player is doing, what they're concerned with in the game. Because people will say, well, technically you can do that. It's just a 15-step process. I want it to be a one-step process, like it's one-to-one with, I want to spend this much, I want to do these 2 things. Go. Nothing else happens. It only spends that much. Full reporting on how that's going. That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking of something that's fundamentally very simplistic, and probably more simplistic than how it works. That's why it frustrates me to think that a lot of work's gone into making this complicated behaviors and base selecting system. But I can't get it to do something really simple, like including just nothing, things like this. Like actually moving ships. Doing the hyper awkward, like click this, this and this while holding the right mouse button the whole time to change the base on one of your fleets for now until the AI decides to change it to something else and it won't tell you it's done that, blah, 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 blah. It's just too much. Like the decisions the player makes, the budgeting, the strategizing need to be directly where you're talking to the game mechanically. That's what you're controlling. What I want from Fleet Automation is a really good pair of legs, as it were. I want them to be really good at implementing extremely basic strategies, and I want them to have no ability whatsoever to strategize for themselves. I think that's where the clash is coming up. The easiest way to describe how it feels, I guess, what I'm kind of getting at here, is that the game has this whole you can't run because you're in a dream feeling, where you're constantly thinking, what I want to do is so easy. Like, my strategy is as simple as, I don't want any defenses at all. But no, there's no way in the game I can say that to the game. So the game's like, oh, you want the maximum amount of possible defenses. Okay. Although that's also an exaggeration, because it doesn't say that. It doesn't say anything at all. You just wake up one morning with no money. Such is life. It's kind of like you constantly have to deal with the 10,000 dumbasses below you in the hierarchy who can't do their job. And so every trivial move you want to make gets rapidly turned into this 10-year process where you have to consult with those dumbasses over and over again and constantly remind them what you wanted them to do, and the costs become impossible to track, and you'll realize some of them have gone off to do their own thing independently and just taken the money with them. And, well, once more, we've stumbled into another revelation about real government problems. The game certainly has a lot of that going on, so as an experience, it's pretty good for that, isn't it? This is something I like to say on this channel. The experience is sure something. By which I guess I mean it has qualities to it that aren't really game design qualities, but they're not qualities. There is an experience to be had, but it's not necessarily the experience you'd want when you sort of pay money for an entertainment product. Well, who knows. What's happening now is we're entering the second phase of the campaign. So we'd best transition into a new part in this video. There was a peaceful time here because I went back and enjoyed a de facto second early game by consolidating and building up the places the inferior AI factions hadn't taken over yet, earning myself something like 5 neighbouring factions despite being on the rim, a nice dodgy situation. My fleet reforms gradually simplified the military situation to the point when I had a bunch of ships at one end of our territory and the rest in the east somewhere, both intended to be used for both attack and defence. Because those 5 neighbours of ours definitely are targets for us, with the exception of Yellow, who I am properly allied to. However, that's not to say I didn't have ambitions for Yellow, and we'll see that later. It's all going very well, I thought, but there is one big problem here. We'll probably see this, or see me discovering this, in the next part. But I am not winning this campaign right now, which is a surprise. In 4X games, after the formative era, where everyone gets established, usually you have already won in the positive feedback loop sense. You have the things you need to win already. If I had conquered Yellow ASAP, that might be where we stand right now. Instead, I believe I'm in 3rd or 4th in the galaxy, with that brown faction in the middle being number 1 and growing rapidly, both internally and through conquest, and with the number 2 being the faction that is currently destroying my green neighbour down south. A race of sinister space spiders, I believe they were. It's hard to sort of tell this because just looking at like territory, you imagine we're quite powerful because we have a lot of territory, but the numbers behind the scenes in the other faction's territory are a lot higher than ours because they've had economic advantages such as being in the middle and having short trade lanes for a long time, and they're gradually building up. They're getting a runaway advantage that we can't get right now. Then there's also talk of this mysterious hive that's going to invade the galaxy. I forget what that even was, so we'll look into that as it happens. There was also the even more mysterious Shaktiri invasion, which is a DLC that I for some reason have, which causes something to brew in the background, similar to a Stellaris crisis, where some powerful enemies will eventually make themselves known and will turn out to be my problem specifically. So some other war's going to happen because of that. Therefore, normally, here I'd be like, we've already won the campaign, I'll just show the rest to get more time to rant about pointless topics. And don't get me wrong, I will be ranting about pointless topics in the next part, only the actual gameplay is the real deciding point of the campaign. It's still in the future. That doesn't normally happen in 4X games. This stands out to me as a unique 4X game experience. This is actually an interesting game state to see so far into a game like this, and while it probably only came about because of my poor decision making, I'm going to praise the game for it anyway. I've played plenty of 4X games badly and still got fatigued halfway in and just thought, well, I've already won, and never seen anything change after a certain point in the campaign. This campaign was different. Here, we need to work. Everything is still to play for, and in part 2, you'll see several plans I came up with to try and get momentum back, including a plan that is easily the most disastrous, terrible strategy I've ever tried, a display of sheer incompetence that took even me by surprise. Like, this was an incompetent strategy that I thought was going to be genius, and then the second I did it, I was like, wait a minute, that was obviously a disgusting move. So we can enjoy that later on, I guess. It's interesting because it reveals the feeling of how easy it is for even people with all the power at their fingertips, with the lives of billions in their hands, to just lapse and make disastrous moves with like really no thought put into it. Historians will say, oh, it must have been 4D chess, there must have been something we don't know about. No, it was 1D chess on the circumference of a ring. So yes, join me to see the real contest. We'll get to know the other contenders and then clash with them. Can pacifism with imperialistic characteristics win out in this doomed galaxy? What other mechanical nuances will send me to the Shadow Realm? Do I actually like this game? Why am I playing this game anyway? And who even is this OVD guy? Some of these questions will be answered in 250,000 words or more in part 2.